Alrighty, folks, it's now 2.5 minutes away from the hour. Rod Charles is a specialist investigator, researcher, and an expert witness. Primary focus on incidents involving risk of fatality and or life-changing injuries. He has served for 30 years. This young man you're going to see in just a wee bit, you'll probably be asking, 30 years? Got to be kidding. 30 years with London's Metropolitan Police and retired at the rank of Chief Inspector. Take a look. This is Mr. Rod Charles. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant.
Just call me George, please. First name basis here.
Thank you, George.
Okay. Pleasure having you. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Rod Charles?
Well, your
That sums it up?
Yeah, your concise summary is spot on. I worked for 30 years. I joined in 1984, retired in 2014 with London's Metropolitan Police. I covered a spectrum of different tasks and projects and portfolios in obviously a 30-year period. So it's a lot I got through. Street duty, general policing, emergency response, road safety, which we'll talk about today, firearms, counter-terrorism, and one of my specialties was public order policing. We're talking about large-scale events, be it carnival, football matches, and other large-scale events where significant members of the public come together.
Now, I explained to our listeners this morning that I heard from you a couple of weeks ago and that you were pretty concerned about the fact that, I mean, there you are sitting in London, you're hearing about all these accidents on this tiny little island of ours. How did that come about, sir?
Well, just for clarity, I was born in London, England, but I first came to Grenada as a 10-year-old. My parents live in St Mark's. I live in St Mark's since my retirement, and I move between the two. So I spend a significant amount of time in Grenada, as I'm here, and also an equivalent amount of time in London. But for several decades now, I have, whilst I'm driving in Grenada, observing the road usage in Grenada, and also when I'm in London, listening to some reports of some really awful collisions which are taking place. And let me be absolutely clear, because I think some of the things I'm going to say will maybe make some people's get some people's heckles up, and people get defensive. And that's not what I'm here to do. But I am here to talk about a very, very difficult set of circumstances. Grenada is, in my opinion, probably the best country in the Caribbean for natural landscapes, etc. And if other countries or other people want to argue that it's that there are others better, my view will be that it's on par. Grenada is on par with its natural, beautiful landscapes.
And a lot of other things, sir.
Indeed, indeed. But the problem that I am here to talk about, whilst I have many other portfolios that I deal with, is the rate of avoidable injuries and deaths that are occurring on these roads. And it's persisted for decades. It's ironic that I contacted you a couple of weeks ago. Again, I thank you for allowing me to speak to your listeners today. But just this week alone, there was a horrendous collision. A bus left the road in Perseverance, St George, and it's clear that numerous double figures of casualties have been taken to hospital. Fortunately, my understanding at the present time is there aren't any fatalities, but there are certainly serious injuries amongst them, and there are possibly life-changing injuries amongst them. I say that because whilst we engaged a couple of weeks ago, the fact that these collisions are regularly, I mean weekly occurring, it is testament to the fact that we need to do something about it. Now, I'll be absolutely clear. Accidents, road traffic accidents do occur. But I have empirical evidence to confirm that a high proportion of those incidents are the result of negligence, and they are avoidable collisions. We must do something about it. I haven't come here simply to rant on and criticize and condemn. This is not what this is about. This is about looking to work with those who are decision makers to enhance what we're doing and what we can do to make Grenada's roads safer. And just to give a bit of background of what I've done in 2016, in September, I wrote to the then Chief of Police, Mr. James, and he kindly, or his staff kindly, arranged a meeting between me and the deputy at the time was Mr. Franklin Redhead. We had a great discussion in October 2016. And this is one of the priorities which I discussed with that senior officer. This isn't personal. It isn't about criticizing individual actions, but my concern is 2 years on, having left that meeting, I am still here. I've been to Grenada and back to London numerous occasions. And how we left it was, well, they'd be in touch. Now, maybe they are doing things behind the scenes.
Over that period of time?
Or maybe they aren't doing anything at all. And I am concerned. And even if they were doing things or are doing things, the problem is those things are not visible and apparent enough, and they are certainly not reducing the rate of collisions that are resulting in loss of lives. And for those who haven't died, many of them are walking the streets of Grenada and parts of the country with life-changing injuries, pain and discomfort, which persists for their lifetimes. We can do something about it. Now, I've contacted the police service. I'm going to, this week, make contact with the current acting commissioner.
Right.
My want will be to hopefully have another discussion, but rather than talk, let's work together, let's put some action plans in. Traffic management planning, look at preventative measures, and then look at investigations. A particular concern to me, and I'll be very careful, George, because when there are active investigations, I have to tread carefully, and I don't want to prejudice any cases. But there are many people who have lost their lives avoidably. There's one in St. Mark's only 3 weeks ago, and the individual's Land Rover turned over. He suffered a head injury, was in hospital in a really terrible state, and then he has subsequently died. There are preventative measures that can be put in place to stop or at least minimize these collisions. But certainly, another concern for me is the standard of investigation post-incident. Now, I know, having seen the deceased vehicle is back in his Land Rover mechanic's yard. There is a suggestion, I stress a suggestion, that another vehicle may have been involved in the driving maneuvers and may have contributed to the collision. But neither of those vehicles have been impounded. Neither of those vehicles have been subject to forensic or mechanical inspections. And I say that because if the investigating officer, who may be listening now, and I'll say, please contact me, this is not condemning or criticizing what you're doing. I'm talking about ways to enhance it. You cannot have conducted the necessary forensics and mechanical inspections when you haven't impounded the vehicles, and because these things must be done systematically, they must be done strategically, they must be done with method. Now, the fact that neither vehicle have been taken into police custody speaks for itself. We have a person who died. As it happens, I know this gentleman very well. I'll be at his funeral on Wednesday, and make no bones about it, because of his fantastic impact on the local community in St. Mark, it will probably result in a significant attendance, and probably the parish will close down for a while whilst people pay their respects. But this isn't just about that case. There are numerous others. Time doesn't permit me to go through the different cases to talk about the serious gaps in investigation. Now, yes, I've spent 30 years in London. I haven't come here to try to usurp anyone's role, to take over anyone's job. I have offered, and I am currently offering, the Royal Grenadian Police Force the opportunity to engage with me. If you don't want to engage with me, with my background and my experience and my links to this country, then so be it. But at least contact me and let me put you in contact with other parties who can help enhance and improve what's going on or what is not going on the roads of Grenada. We need traffic management planning. We need better road signage. We have drivers who, it isn't just about bus drivers, but we have drivers who have multiple people on board, driving vehicles commercially for gain. If they don't have an interest in their own welfare and safeguarding their own lives, they should certainly have an interest in caring for the people who are on their buses. They have no right to drive in a manner that risks the lives and loses the lives of people who are using their services. So I talk about some of the sanctions that we can put in place: greater enforcement, greater prevention, disqualifying drivers for fixed period of times or for indefinite periods of time, depending on the risks that they present on Grenada's roads, impounding vehicles if we can't get the drivers to comply. There are a whole range, a whole raft of things that we can be doing. But George, I have concerns that this isn't going to change. So to the Chief of Police and to relevant government ministers, you will hear from me this week. If you're listening now, then you by all means, through George Grant's radio station, you can contact me. I am amenable, even when I'm in London. It matters not. We have the wonders of technology. I will do my damnedest to help enhance what's taking place on the roads. But without some engagement, we're not going to have any improvement. One other point that I'll just emphasize here is the use of mobile phones and other devices that distract drivers when you're driving at sometimes too excessive speed, which don't fit the current road conditions. And then you are distracted by some technical device. These are contributing factors. I am not saying that these are factors in the cases that I've made reference to, but I am saying that they are the cause of a number of collisions. And why I am stern about this, why I am not pulling punches about it, is because people are losing their lives. And those who haven't lost their lives are having to spend the rest of their lives with avoidable disabilities, infirmities, because we're not doing enough here. Obviously, having worked for 30 years with the police service, I had the privilege of going to America to work with some of their organizations. I'd worked across Europe. What I will say is the investigations that needs to take place after collisions is quite it's quite significant. It takes a lot of time. Some of the friends and families went to see the casualty of the Land Rover collision, Mr. Scott, in hospital. And I'm aghast to learn that while he was being treated for a medical injury, a serious head wound, and I think he may have ingested some gasoline, he was restrained and strapped, tied to a bed in the General Hospital. Now, I'm confident as well to say that as we speak, there are probably other patients and casualties tied to beds. Now, this is, for whatever reason, it's become quite common practice. Some may say, well, what relevance is there to road traffic safety? But it's linked. This is about the care and the recuperation of patients. In my time, I have dealt with numerous psychiatric patients who, as a last resort, will be physically restrained. In the General Hospital at the present time, there are casualties, medically ill, not psychiatrically ill patients who are actually strapped, restrained, and tied to their beds. And even in this week alone, speaking to one or two people, just a dip sample poll. I won't say names of the people involved. Fortunately, not all of them have passed away. But at least 5 that I have on my list here have died. I'm not saying it's because of the medical care. I'm saying that it is barbaric and it does not happen in other developed countries. Grenada is a developed country. Grenada is smaller in scale. It doesn't have the finances of other countries. But we are restraining, strapping, tying medically ill people to beds. And this practice must stop forthwith. There is no justification for it. It isn't going to assist somebody's recovery. And while some would say, well, who are you to speak on this? Well, I have a background. My expertise is in policing, law enforcement, security and investigations. But clearly, I can give empirical proof of this, that I have partners and I have colleagues who have backgrounds in the medical sphere. People aren't tied to beds in London or any place in the United Kingdom. Quite frankly, if there was a case of a person tied to a bed in the UK, I'd say as America as well, but I don't spend a lot of time over there. If there were cases, I will tell you that the doctor who has given the decision to do that and the nursing staff would face prosecution. It is barbaric and it has to stop because it doesn't apply elsewhere. It will not help casualties in Grenada to continue with this practice.
Rod, you have said a lot, and there are a couple of things I want to talk with you about. But first, there are a number of comments here from people around the world who are listening to you right now, and I don't want to get too far behind, so let's start here. Ryan is a Grenadian who lives out in Orlando, Florida, and he comes to your line and says, "Officer, I drove on Grenada roads on my October 18th vacation and find island drivers reckless and negligent. Grenada drivers love to overtake too much. Traffic police monitoring reckless drivers in Grenada and giving costly moving violations." And about the restraints, he says, "Patients die in restraints." Okay, that's Ryan. But there are other people out there. Kipling says, "The plain truth is lots of Grenadian drivers just cannot drive. Quite a few buy their license." And this is something that's been talked about here in the past. This is nothing new. I have no proof that that is the case, but it's something that's commonly talked about in this country. Alana Morris Van Tassel says, "What are we talking about? The dangerous taxi drivers in Grenada? Ha ha!" She sees a little humor in that. Peter Bishop says, "The gentleman knows his stuff. I wish him the best with his meeting with the RGPF. But Grenada is a talk shop society. Only talk and little follow-up." Rod, that's an ex-police officer there. That's an ex-police officer.
I cannot disagree with anything I've heard today. And it's sad that I cannot.
I ain't through with you yet, sir. Ernesto Jose says, "How can the police investigate the police when lots of the buses are owned and driven by themselves?" You're nodding your head. Kipling says, "The high cost of living, the high cost of gas, so much on one's mind while driving. That's a lot to cope with." And Margaret Francis is listening to you in New York right now. And she says, "Rod, he is right. restraining patients is considered abuse. This woman is in the healthcare system in New York.
It is a practice that must stop forthwith. It must stop right this moment, because it isn't a one-off occurrence. It is ongoing. I find it disbelief until you see it yourself, and then you think, well, goodness me, how can this continue? Because it doesn't apply. It cannot apply elsewhere. Therefore, whatever medical arrangements, whether medical procedures they have elsewhere, then we need to adopt them here. I have talked about the support and the work I want to do with the police service to safeguard the roads. I am not a medical practitioner, but I know people who are, who have the expertise, and they can give advice. Nobody is coming here trying to take a job to remove a person from their role. You keep your role. You keep your status. But what you do need to do is to consult those people who have a different way, who have maybe a different depth and breadth of experience to assist, to enhance what's taking place in Grenada. There's a saying which I used to laugh about as a boy and a teenager and a young man growing up in Grenada. They say that if you can drive in Grenada, you can drive anywhere. And in the last few years, there's no more humor in that for me. I find it dismissive, and I find it offensive. I don't joke about it anymore, because the casualties, the deaths, the life-changing injuries, they're too serious now for me to continue to joke about stuff which isn't true. Fantastic mountainous roads in Grenada. It's a unique drive-in terrain. But when you drive recklessly here and think that covering speed and putting lives at risk means you can drive anywhere else, if you were to try to drive like that in another country, again, robust prosecution and sanctions would follow. You would be removed from the road, your vehicle would be impounded. And in the event that that doesn't stop you, then you would be incarcerated. That's what would happen, because what's taking place on the road here is scandalous. If in the intervening time between me talking to you today and if the RGPF deign that they want to talk to me, that will be fantastic. But I am absolutely confident that in that intervening time, there will be more casualties. So let's do something to help remedy the problem. I haven't come here to say, look, I can talk to you and change it in a heartbeat. What I have come to say is, we can change it. And whereas some will say, well, Grenada doesn't have the money, I have 30 years background. I have the experience, the skill, the knowledge, the training packages. I trained officers in London. I can train officers here. And better still, not worse still, better still, I have offered to do this at virtual nil cost, because I have an affinity and links to Grenada. So I have to ask myself, why won't people engage with me? Why won't the powers that be engage? Maybe they're content with what they have here.
That's part of it. And let me jump in here. I hate to interrupt you, but I have to jump in here because, Rod, there is a paranoia. You know, I don't think you're coming here asking to take anybody's job away from them. I don't get that feeling. However, I'll tell you, I've been back here 31 years. I lived in Canada, and I was treated as though I was here to steal somebody's job. There's this paranoia that, you know, people from the outside are here to take out jobs, when all you want to do is help and ask for nothing in return. Okay? There's a note here from somebody named Penny C. Penny C lives in northern Quebec. She says, Mr. Charles, as a frequent visitor to Grenada, I always shudder at the prospect of being crammed way beyond capacity into the local buses. Where is the safety? Not to mention the driving habits of not all, but some drivers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's on Rumble Chat. Grantus King Lion says safety is not a friendly word in Grenada. Yeah? Ryan says there is a need for radar detected traffic police on Maurice Bishop Highway to combat speeders. Come on, Ryan, please give me a break. For years, I have heard about these radar detectors. You have television news showing these bright, glitzy little devices that have been given. Where the hell is the use of those detectors, Ryan? We have them. Margaret Francis says, I think a big part of the problem is the we are the best syndrome. So we have the best drivers, the best nurses, the best government, the best. So if you are the best, there's no need for additional knowledge and self-improvement. Hold on a sec here. There is no need for additional knowledge and self-improvement, and so crap will continue. So says Margaret in New York. Kipling says, on behalf of concerned Grenadians, I wish to thank you for trying to help. Thank you, sir. But sad to say, if you were a Chinese, you would have been accepted. And finally, not finally, but on Facebook anyway, Ernesto says, Mr. Rod, you meant well, but remember, we don't like changes. And we love to complain when things are not going our way. Good luck. You know, even before I move on, Rod, do you see how what you're saying here is resonating with the audience this morning? So, I mean, this guy is not some space cadet who showed up here this morning and wanted airtime on social media. He knows what he's talking about, and you folks are relating. Ronnie Slinger says, the bright light on some vehicles at night is a problem. Do you know there are people in this country who refuse to drive at night anymore?
I know many people who don't like to come, many people resident here who, be it nighttime driving or driving on the Western Road. They prefer not to do it because of the hazards there. But the hazard isn't the actual road, the road is the road. Yes, work can be done to enhance it and to safeguard it, put safety railings up and better signage. But the real hazard is the method, the manner in which some of the drivers are propelling their vehicles at speed and the maneuvers, and where they position or abandon their vehicles, leaving additional hazards for other road users. I don't doubt for a minute that what I'm saying here will fall on many deaf ears. But that doesn't mean I live in Grenada. I live in London. I'm between the two. I have a passion for this, so I will continue. It would be nice to hear from the police service, but they are going to hear from me again. And I will continue to do so. But if we can't get the authorities to effect those changes, then I think the people need to start working together and make their voices clearer. Some won't want to, it may be deaf ears for some, but the bottom line is those listeners now will know people who they lost. They will know people who are currently walking with ailments and disabilities and infirmities which resulted from avoidable collisions. And it's to those people then, and those loved ones of those individuals, I say engage with me, because we can either do it with the police service and the government ministers, or, failing that, we'll do it anyway. Because there are ways to do it. But without the authorities, and this isn't about insurrection and trying to oppose individuals. My take is this. The starting point is to work with those authorities that have the power and the resources to make things happen. I know that there's money needed, there's additional resources, but there's also something about the better use of resources. Patrolling officers. When officers are patrolling, how do we brief them? What tactics and training do they have? The technical instruments that we spoke about is part of the problem. I had a gentleman strike my sister. I was driving my sister's car. I had a plumber in with me, driving down to St. George. This is a year ago. And he overtook me, cut in too soon, and hit the offside front of my vehicle. And he was off like a light. I thought, goodness me. So I followed him. And he got stuck in Happy Hill, fortunately. And I was able to block him. And I, as good as detained him. I had his keys for his vehicle. And then I learnt he was an unlicensed driver. True story. True fact here. He pleaded with me to let him go. I don't know if it was the way I spoke to him, but he gave me his keys and realised that, I'm just a normal visitor like him or another resident like him. And he wanted his keys back. But they were in my pocket, and I thought, well, the only way you're going to get them is if you try to take them. And that wasn't going to happen. We were there on the road for about 30, 40 minutes, and the police officer, whose number is clear here, I won't embarrass that officer, came past on a motorcycle. The errant driver panicked and pleaded with me, listen, I'll do whatever, I'll try and make amends. I told the officer, this is a fail to stop accident, or collision. I don't like the term accident because these things are not accidents, they're avoidable collisions. And the officer, having explained to the officer that I had to pursue this driver for almost a mile to get him to stop, the officer said to me, well, this isn't his patch. He'll call another officer who will report the collision. And I realized, you know what, I will have to deal with things myself, even though I'm retired, and even if I'm not retired, I have experienced it, but I live in Grenada, and so I got the guy to pay for the damage to my vehicle. But this is a case of an individual who had no license. I had the guy stopped, I had his keys in my pocket, and I had a police officer in uniform turn up on a motorbike. And if the commissioner wants to talk to me about it, I will tell him the officer's collar number. But the officer said it's not his jurisdiction, he'll call someone else. You won't be surprised to know, George, nobody turned up. But Grenada, as we know, is 21 miles long. It's 12 miles wide. It is not 110,000 people thereabouts. It is not a massive area. When an officer comes across an incident of this kind, then the onus is on them to be professional and to deal with it. Fortunate for me, I live here. I know Grenada well for many, many years. If this was a tourist or a visitor, they would be at a loss because that officer's response would, I dare say, have been the same. He could say it wouldn't be, but I think, well, why not? I'm a person who told you. And I explained to him, this wasn't a straightforward touch collision and we stopped. I had to pursue the guy who was like a bat out, like trying to fly away from me, but I know the roads, and I managed to stop him. I'll stop there because, as I say, this, George, it's not about me. But why I give that story, and I could give others, is because I want the public to know that I haven't just turned up here to talk fancifully about things. I'm talking about things I've observed and experienced myself.
Rod, let me assure you, the public knows. You're preaching
to the converted.
Okay? They know. I want to touch on a couple of things. You mentioned the limited resources. You know, for many, many years, I worked very closely with the police, trying to create an environment of public relations where I wanted the public to feel comfortable with the police and vice versa. I am now convinced that this goes way beyond a lack of resources. It's a mindset. It's a mindset.
I think you're right.
Let me tell you something. I talked within the last month anyway, I spoke about an incident where on a crosswalk downtown near the Ditchercell on Melville Street there, I almost got run over by a car that had come from the tunnel, okay? While I'm on the crosswalk, there are two police officers, one with bars. They were totally oblivious to what happened. They're standing at the crosswalk. A pedestrian almost gets run over, and they like nothing happened. Okay? It's a mindset. It's a mindset. On Rumble Chat here, Isaac says, we're having too many accidents on our roads, especially in recent times. Some drivers are without proper driving licenses, having purchased their driver's licenses. Only recently, police officers were charged for selling driver's licenses. Charles, I would suggest that you speak to PM Mitchell. So says OP.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
It's a good idea. Ryan says, Grenada drivers blind you at night with blazing LED headlamps. So you pull off the road and let them go by. And I do let them get in front of me. Okay. Bernard Gilbert says, too many lying excuses at the top. You know, I mean, I'm not surprised at the reaction you're getting here this morning. I'm not, you know. And when people like me speak out, you're subject to persecution, victimization, ostracization. I've lost a radio station for speaking out.
Yeah, I mean, I've followed you for a few years, George.
Because I speak out.
I think for me, the difficulty here is I have been more behind the scenes. I am going to continue to propel and project my voice.
Like me.
I'm going to keep doing it, and maybe I thank you twice. I'll do it a third time. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to your listeners. But the reason I'm going to do it, and the reason I'm not going to pull my punches, is because whilst there will be many people who will be vexed or angered at some of the things I say when there's no real reason to be, I am more passionate and more concerned about the people who died needlessly, the people who are walking or moving about with disabilities and infirmities because they were in avoidable accidents. And as we speak, in the interim, before we get anything done, if the authorities want to engage, I've said it once, I'll say it again, the high risk is there are people who are currently in good health. And that's going to change unless we do something about it, because there are people using the roads, and I don't think for a minute they set out to cause the adverse impact that they do cause. But nonetheless, they are negligent, they are careless, and they are dealing and creating collisions that are avoidable. And that's why I'm emphasizing these are collisions. We stopped, in my policing years, the earlier years, we talked about accidents, and then we noticed over the years we stopped referring to accidents because we know accidents do occur. But in the vast majority of instances, it's down to either defects in the vehicle or, more prominent, defects in the driving. And these collisions, not accidents, these collisions are avoidable. So we've got to do something about it.
Ryan says, for 20 years I drove in Greater London, the UK, and the Met enforce traffic laws. Okay?
Absolutely.
Let's dream on here, right? Kipling says, you know, this. Some people are going to laugh at this, but this is a very sad state of affairs. It goes to show the level of frustration and cynicism that has built up in the Grenadian people over years. Kipling says, good luck speaking to the PM. Case closed. You know, we chuckle at that, Rod, but it's a sad, sad commentary on where we are in Grenada today. Sad. Ryan says, here in Florida, the state troopers also enforce traffic laws. Grenada must step up. I think that's it. Rod, could you try and summarize? You've mentioned things that you'd like to see change, but could you just summarize some steps that would help to enhance the current situation?
There are not necessarily in the order I'm giving them, but
Okay.
these are a series of actions that need to take place. There needs to be a revision and a review of the training provided to the police officers. I know amongst them, and some I know personally, I'm not criticizing any individual, I'm talking about the generic training and the understanding of what they should be doing when they're on patrol. When they're on patrol, they need to be able to deal with incidents without fear or favour. And a significant problem here, because we're dealing with a small community, is confidentiality. And therefore, an officer may decide not to act with integrity or openness and fairness because he or she has an allegiance or a family relationship to a particular person who may know somebody involved in, we're talking about road collisions here. I know it's very different because in the United Kingdom with 63 million people, and in the capital where I worked, you had 8 million people, 10 million people with the commuters coming back and forward. So you don't have that small group connections. You have that in Grenada. But road signage for people who are visiting Grenada, yes, there's a little bit of expense, but the roads are quite hazardous, winding roads through mountains. You need to tell visitors who decide to hire vehicles what the hazards are and put them in advance. And if the police want to claim that the signs are being removed, then that's down to them to enforce and prosecute those people who are interfering with them. There are drivers who are listening now. Some, this falls on deaf ears. Some will say, well, he's not talking about me. But I am talking about you. It's not just bus drivers, but it's a whole range. It includes bus drivers and a whole range of individuals. In terms of steps, George, if they won't comply, they need to be prosecuted and disqualified from driving for fixed periods of time. In the event that your driving persists, your standard of driving is so low and persists that you risk people's lives, then you can be disqualified for indefinite periods of times. And then we need to get round to impounding vehicles. So if that does, at the incremental levels, if they won't comply, if prosecution doesn't work, take the vehicle from them. Not randomly, but having legislation to do so. And I come back full circle that you're never going to prevent all collisions. It's never going to happen. There's collisions in London as we speak. But the aftermath of collisions, the investigation must be thorough. And as I say, on Wednesday, St. Mark's will be in shutdown as people mourn the loss of Anderson Scott. And for the officers who are listening, because of the early evidential gathering that it's clear to me has not taken place, I invite you to contact me. Don't be hostile, come and speak to me. Some things you won't be able to recover, because if you don't get them early, you'll be struggling. But you need to have post-investigative measures which are effective. Prevention, and where we can't prevent it, investigate it thoroughly. Grenada, as you've rightly said, I talked about the landscape and you said there are many things more. I wasn't born in Grenada, but I am a dual national. I can't determine where I'm born. I was born in London. But my parents brought me here when I was 10 of my own volition. I am here in Grenada for significant proportions of any year, and as I age, I guess I may spend more and more time here. This is something which is passionate for me, and I ask those people in power, from the Prime Minister through to the senior police officers, please engage with me, and if you don't like dealing with me, that's fine. It's not about me. Then I will put you in touch with other people, other organizations that can help enhance what's taking place here. And if you don't do that, then somehow, because problem solving is what I do, then I'm going to go about with the residents of this country to enhance and safeguard people. If we can't get those people who have the responsibility to do it, then we have to do it ourselves.
There's a gentleman now in Carriacou He's an English gentleman. He's listening to you right now. And he says, "Good luck, Mr. Charles. Some of these drivers wouldn't last 5 minutes in London."
Less than that.
Yeah, yeah. Joyce E. Smith says, "Is there any law in Grenada? Everyone seems to do as they like." Yeah. They're resonating. They're resonating. Ernesto says, "Mr. Rod, I think you should set up a meeting with the commissioner. He seems decent and willing to listen to make important, I would imagine, best decisions for Grenada." You know, I'm happy to hear that you're going to talk with the police this week. And just getting back to what Ernesto was saying here, we have a commissioner now, and I have probably the highest hopes I've had in the 36 years since I've been back here for the RGPF. I believe that this man means well. Whether or not he's going to have the latitude to do what he believes needs to be done will have to be seen. Okay? I believe that he's capable. But again, whether or not he has the latitude to do what needs to be done is left to be seen.
George, may I say then, because just for absolute clarity, having previously contacted the former commissioner, this timing could be very good here. I don't have a meeting set up with the current commissioner, but if he or anyone close to him is listening, then you can reach out to me. Make no bones about it. This week, I will be making contact with the commissioner, and I will be flexible, have latitude to align my availability to the busy commissioner's calendar. So I will be making more approaches, and I will see the commissioner, assuming he cares to see me.
Well, you know, I hope that you're going to keep us informed on the outcome of your meeting with the commissioner. And
if he agrees to see me.
If he agrees to see you. I think it would be good if he could hear the conversation that we're having here this morning. Tessa Barry says, "I'm willing to join an awareness team with you, sir, if the authorities are not taking you on. An awareness campaign is a good start, utilizing all available media networks, slogans, signs, jingles, etc." Awareness. You know, that we pass everything on to education and awareness.
Did you say Tessa Barry there?
Tessa,
George?
Tessa. I've got her contact.
You'll have my contact, and if you could facilitate us communicating, that would be fantastic. Tessa, I would be pleased to start a dialogue and some action plans with you.
Rod, I was just about to say the issue here is enforcement. I am sick and tired of hearing about, oh, let's educate. We make some jingles, we put some posters up and
Yeah.
and that's it. And then people just go do what they shouldn't be doing. You know, a few years ago, they came up with this thing about wearing seatbelts. For a little while, big brouhaha, man. People are being charged. And then, gone. No enforcement. Where is this taking us, man?
You see, the pressure here comes to the current commissioner because the onus is on that senior officer not to be directly accountable for every action of individual police officers because, again, he can't be everywhere. But it is for him to put in place an infrastructure that will make sure that officers are correctly briefed and officers follow through. Officers are also, you talked about officers with chevrons on stripes, etc. When I was promoted I was fortunate, I did a few more promotions, but I became a sergeant. I can tell you that is the most significant leap in policing. From constable to sergeant is the most significant leap. Why? Because the transition to supervision, the transition to being held to account, And for the first time, the first tier, that you become responsible for the actions of officers or the omissions of officers when they don't do their job correctly. That's a lot of pressure on officers. So when an officer is patrolling or moving around with the chevrons, looks impressive. But it's only impressive if you make that supervision work for you. And some, I don't know all of them, but some do not. But it does, and this is where it comes back to the chief of police. Because I'm looking forward to making contact. That will probably be done tonight, if not tomorrow morning. And I'll stand by to see what response comes through. If the public, and it's a small country, if anybody is in, family members are listening to the commissioner and want to bring his attention to this person who's been talking on the radio, then please give advance notice that I am going to be contacting them within 24 hours. And I'll leave the onus on the police to engage. I am not here trying to usurp or trying to change. I'm here trying to give the benefit of 30 years experience.
And I think the public is aware of that. I really do believe that. And, you know, we need to also avoid casting a broad blanket, because I can attest to the fact that there are police officers in the force who over the years have worked their buns off to serve and protect.
It is very difficult for those excellent officers to continue to try to strive when they have in their midst officers who are not punching their weight and pulling their weight. And so they are. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if I've given the impression that it's all officers, then I would be wrong. Having worked in policing, I know that there are excellent officers who are trying, but they are tarnished by the actions or the omissions of other officers.
Which brings me to another issue, and that has to do with their employment policy. You know, not everybody's made to be a cop.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, there are a lot of people out there who just want to work.
Yes.
They want a job.
Absolutely.
So you hire pretty much anybody. And therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. It starts right at the beginning. Tessa Barry says, George, I remember when there was a time Grenadians used to do a lot of littering. Awareness campaign facilitated by Ms. It's not Mona, it's not Mona Tessa, it's Myrna, M-Y-R-N-A, went a long way. Not 100%, but a lot of Grenadians became more conscious of what they were doing. We can help ourselves. If 3 bus drivers are touched by awareness, that's 15 lives safer. Bob Marichaux says, Ryan says, our Grenada has so many nice places to drive to for a visit, but driving on the roads is a deterrent. Joycey Smith says, I live in London, and I can relate with what he is saying. Driving offenses here are a serious matter. Bob Marichaux says, I think that there is enough traffic offenses to warrant a traffic court at evenings or night in Grenada. Fines are always a deterrent in these cases, but it will have to work in tandem with enforcement.
You have to disqualify people from the road when they won't heed the laws. And if the disqualification doesn't work because they cannot comply with the orders, then you have to impound the vehicles that they are given access to. And that might mean some tweaking or creation of new laws. But you know what? It's worth doing it, because not to do it results in the tragedies and the catastrophes we've been talking about.
Bernard Gilbert says the buses carry too many passengers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, it's just a mindset that needs to be changed, and the only way you're going to change that mindset is with some enforcement.
Yep.
Careful selection of employees for the force and enforcement. Ernesto says, I'm with you, and we'll be praying for you to help bring about that change with your experience which is needed badly. Kipling Francis says, "Sir, the only way these things can and will work is when and if we have a change of government." But that is, again, I say, if and when. You know, Kipling, you may have a point, but I believe without a change of government, change of mindset.
This isn't a political solution.
It's not.
It's not a political solution. It needs robust supervision. It needs robust directions, and it needs to hold officers to account when they fail to do what they should have done. And in absence of that, the officers can walk by, they can disregard, they can ignore things. And based on what we said a little while ago, let me stress, some officers.
Yeah.
Because there are other officers out there doing their damnedest to do well. But they're struggling when they look at their colleagues who are not doing what they should be doing. And these individuals are allowed to do it have their omissions with impunity.
Yeah.
Because the supervisors don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that I am talking about. This is the kind of change in regime, because I'll tell you, when you, as a police officer, I never left a police station. I was uniformed for 30 years. I never left a police station without a thorough briefing on what were the recent events and what our intelligence said are likely to happen. And then in and around that, there are things that happen unexpectedly. But that's the beauty of policing, because they train you to be able to react to it. Mm-hmm. Officers need to be briefed thoroughly, and officers need to be challenged if they are told that if people learn that they didn't do something that they should have done. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, those officers who are what I will describe as more rogue officers or lazy officers, and as offensive as it may sound, unfortunately, listeners, it's true about some officers. And the way to remedy them is to have sanctions. And when you don't do what you should be doing, then you are no longer part of the police service. Let's find people who want to do the job. Let's find people who care about the community. Because there are many out there who would love to have a crack at working within the police service. None of this is easy, but I managed to climb a few ranks in the police service. I scraped my head the other day, so the grey hairs aren't showing through as much as they normally do. Rest assured, my difficulties in the police service came from managing and challenging officers who underperformed or would not do what they would do. And so internally, behind the scenes, they're real hard stuff, real hard challenges. And that's where sergeants, inspectors and upwards have to be called to account. It's not just a person on the street not performing. They're not performing because their managers don't insist that they perform.
You know what's so particularly interesting about this conversation is that, excuse me, but you're an outsider. It's not like you're somebody who's here with an axe to grind. You know, there are a lot of people here who bitch because, well, I don't like so-and-so, and, you know. That's not the case with you. You're an outsider who's trying to help. Well, I'll tell you, I know that they have been listening. Based on the feedback I'm seeing here on Facebook and on Rumble Chat, they are listening. And you have said a lot that other people would like to say. But there's also a fear, my friend, of speaking out in this country. Big time. And that in itself is sad.
That is sad. I thank you again, George, for allowing me to have this extended time talking to you and to your listeners.
Well, if you really want to show your appreciation, how about keeping us informed on where things go from here?
Without
so this
doubt.
is not a one-off thing.
Without doubt. Thank you very much, and I will update, be it progress through discussion and then action, or in the event that I'm rebuffed and ignored, either way, I'll keep you updated
One
on how
way or
we're
another.
doing.
And look, Ernesto was saying here, great interview, Mr. Grant. Would you have him back to give us an update on the progress made? Then Joycey Smith says, there should be signs on the road stating speed limits and not which party to vote for.
Absolutely.
Yvonne Joseph says, Mr. Grant, what this gentleman is saying is so true. I came home last year when my mom died, but was scared to take a bus. Ryan says, laissez-faire and paranoia are malaise in Grenada. Tessa Barry on Rumble Chat says, George, passengers can also get drivers to be more conscious. Get off the buses. Ask the questions in the driver's seat to slow down or drop you from the personal vehicles. You know something? I don't have a car, so I use public transportation a lot. And I got off a bus the other day because this bus driver, it's not that he was driving recklessly. He was, well, driving like an idiot. But stopping and waiting for passengers that were never existent. It's just a mindset. He doesn't give a hoot. The bus was almost full, but he just wanted 2 more people, and he's going to keep the 13 or whatever number of other people waiting until, hopefully, somebody shows up. It's a mindset, Rod. Kipling says, policemen that were dismissed from the force for wrongdoing under the NDC are back on the force and promoted. And you say it's not politics? So says Kipling. Dennis Perkins says, thanks, Mr. Charles. More power to your elbow. That's the British gentleman I was telling you about. Ryan says, thank you, officer. More, please. Love it. Oh, man, I am so glad we had this chat. Joycey Smith here is talking about now, and the loud music. That's another issue. Let me tell you something. Loud music. I spent 5 years working with the Royal Grenada Police Force to come up with a noise control act. And that was about 10 years ago. And I understand, I was told by a lawyer not too long ago, nobody's been charged under that act. They're just not serious. They're just not serious. God help us. Ryan says, GG, you have to be brave to use the Grenadian buses. Okay, folks, time out, time out. Georgie Porgy's got to go because we have some other things to take care of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Keep in touch.
Thank you.
All right.